So yeah, we'll be talking about BIM-led communication in practice. So essentially just talking through how we utilise BIM to sort of make sure everyone's on the same page, there's no information silos, and just the information flows between all the parties to get sort of a good result out of the end of it. So just a short introduction. So myself, I'm a senior architecture technologist, working through my sort of accreditation with CitA. I've been working in the construction industry for sort of nearly 12 years now. Sort of took a bit of a diversion after the 2008 sort of crash. So ended up going in via sort of the main contractor and looking at all the design coordination there with all their services, coming through project management in sort of large-scale retail developments, and then sort of coming full circle back into architecture when I came across to Ireland sort of 6 years ago. And the company I came into was ALTU Architects. So they've been going a good while from 1997. They were previously called LAFTI Architects, and we sort of had a rebrand sort of last year. And companies sort of expanded and contracted throughout the time, but at the moment we've got about 34 architects and technologists and an office in Poland as well. And sort of working in the wide range of different sectors, sort of commercial, retail, housing, and a few in the healthcare sector as well. And then I suppose just want to sort of touch on the BIM journey of ALTU as they've sort of evolved their process going through. So sort of the earliest use of ALTU in BIM was around 2006, and they sort of saw some new softwares and started sort of trying to see if there was any benefits and value from using BIM as a tool. I suppose anyone sort of doing the numbers in their heads, like, I wouldn't have had anything to do with that part of the process. That's all benefiting to someone else. But I suppose my own experience in 2006 at university, sort of seeing a couple of BIM tools, doing a self-study module in a couple of BIM tools, and then going into my work placement in a practicing architects, coming in with all my BIM ideas and being looked as if I'd just beamed down from outer space, like this isn't going to catch on, this isn't going to work, like what are you talking about, just get into CAD. So I can sort of, I wasn't there for ALTU, but I can appreciate sort of the involvement in trying to get other partners with a similar sort of mindset to try and get stuff going, and obviously slowly but surely managed to get going, and from 2012 they'd been delivering all of their projects fully within a BIM environment, and just using that for all of the benefits that they could see as a company. So even though it wasn't sort of a full BIM level 2 process from start to finish, it was sort of picking and choosing the best and most value of the BIM elements, bringing them together to sort of start that process up into 2021, so 2 years ago, where they got all the information together, BIM execution plans and the whole process map to be able to be verified as a ISO 19650 Tier 1 designer. And then I suppose the purpose of sort of highlighting the process of ALTU and how we use a few select examples of how we're using BIM to enable good communication within projects, I suppose, is looking towards anyone that isn't using BIM. I suppose it gives a few key areas where we find value ourselves, which might be a good place for you to start looking into BIM. And for anyone else, the clients, architects and other consultants that are fully in BIM, I suppose it's just opening up the conversation of this is where we're really finding value in BIM and the communication, and then opening that to sort of feedback. Where are you seeing we need to be pushing more in other areas as well in terms of what you're looking to get out of the process. So I'll start off with sort of early design and planning, and a lot of this will be very familiar because particularly in architecture, a lot of that initial BIM and 3D modelling has been used to sort of quite good effect in sort of the early stages of the design project to communicate sort of different designs, different iterations. And I suppose up until now, there's been a lot of good 3D information and a lot of good 2D information. And I know in previous places I've worked at, and even currently sort of doing due diligence with other projects, a lot of that information isn't necessarily connected, so you're potentially looking at which is the right version. Are we looking at the visual 3D? Is that the most up-to-date information? Is it the 2D CAD? And it's just sort of looking at that holistically and how to sort of bring that forward and have everything well coordinated across the entire package. So it's essentially sort of an open BIM sort of concept and communication. So we've got everything centrally in the BIM model, and everything is derived from that model. So sort of 3D visuals are linked into that BIM model, and they essentially update automatically, and there's just a sort of minor amount of processing so that exactly reflects what is on the 2D drawings. And then also sharing that with the other design team members at the early stages, so they've got a full understanding of sort of the process, what we're going through, and everyone's up to date. And particularly as well, sort of bringing the planners along on the same sort of process. So we're going through with different iterations, and it's just been a really good tool to be able to talk to the planners and everyone getting what they need out of the process. And similarly with sort of clients and developers as well, so just having that BIM model and having it as an intelligent model, you can extract all the information just to make their decisions a lot quicker and easier, and to get valuable, useful feedback from them back to us so that we're giving them what they need. So different options and iterations, because that's linked in the model, that's all producing automated schedules, so they know exactly the number of units, the net lettable area, all the sort of key information they're looking to get, and they're communicating up the chain to their funders to get funding for the projects. It just makes their job a lot easier going up the chain, which means we're getting a lot quicker feedback, a lot more quality feedback coming back to us to be able to develop the project essentially in a way that works. And then into sort of the area that I spend sort of most of my time, so in sort of the detailed design and tender, and that's where I myself personally find a huge amount of value in sort of using BIM as a communication tool and having everyone sort of coordinated and on the same page. So the initial one that a lot of people are using now is sort of just the use of IFCs. So essentially, once you've sort of all agreed your LODs for the sort of level of detail, all your survey points and how you're coordinating that together, essentially just the exchange of information flows a lot better after that, and you've essentially got models federating into our model that you're literally just adding it in and it's going straight into place once the initial stuff's set up. And that's just really allowing sort of a good understanding of the building, and can be used during the design team meetings to really go through elements of the building, picking it apart and making sure you're resolving issues at the early design stages. And just for example, we're sort of using sort of the BIM tools to where you've got the different IFC models coming in, using different ways of displaying the information in the model. So we're essentially turning, in certain examples, our architectural elements that we're in control of sort of semi-transparent, so you can essentially see like the bones, the skeleton of the building and all the services within that, just so that everyone understands how it's all fitting together, and even the client themselves seeing how it's fitting together, and they can see if you're saying this is taking more time to figure out, they can visually see the complexity, and they can be brought along the journey with you, and they're more fully supportive of that process if they're brought along on the journey as well. And then also just the benefits of everyone feeding into the same model, like as a 2D drawing or a schematic, like it's particularly electrical drawings, like a symbol on a drawing that looks the same as maybe a small call point can be a huge fire alarm panel, for instance. So we had a project where everything looked fairly good on the symbols on the plan, and then as soon as we brought in the IFC, you've got the main reception as you're coming in, the main presentation of the building, and then you've got a couple of huge great boxes stuck on the wall, and that was just very easy to sort of everyone to see, and just allow the whole process of, okay, it does need to be in and around this area, can we find a better place to put this that's going to meet everyone's needs essentially. And then taking that further as well, like using the sort of open BIM standards, not everyone uses the same software, and I suppose even if you are using the same software, people might be on different years. So even within the same software, there's a certain amount of open BIM required and agreements required to communicate that information. And on this project down in Blackrock, the specialist subcontractor for the glazed roof canopy was brought in earlier in the design process before the job was tendered out to the main contractors. They were using a combination of parametric design using Rhino and Grasshopper, and I think they were tweaking stuff in SolidWorks. We were using our own BIM software. We had the engineers using their own BIM software, and just the complexities of this structure. The top left-hand corner of the building, we had sort of concrete slabs we're connecting into. The bottom right-hand side, we've got steel structure we're connecting into. We're abutting SuperValu, a shopping centre there. And the roof was sort of engineered to such a degree to make it efficient and visually lightweight that every one of those panels was the same size, 1500 by 1500. There's an existing shopping centre and existing structural points we're connecting into. So we were creating a ring beam around those and dropping down supports onto that. And then also coordinating that within the existing shopping centre layout with the central tree structures going down to the middle. There was just no way that could have been done sort of using 2D drawings or even a couple of 3D models that weren't talking to each other. They all had to be brought in at the same time to really get it to be a successful delivery of this as a solution. And I suppose because it was so well understood and so well coordinated, using that method, we were even able to, the way that the supporting structures around the ring beam, around the edge, you could even start utilising bits. So the upstand that was already being created and already costed for the structure of the roof, utilising that to actually house a complete cable tray and tidying up all of the previous M&E services that were draped across the existing shopping centre and all twisted up between all of the existing sort of lightweight steel roof structure. And then I suppose building on that, the RC formats, there is the BCF collaboration format as well. So essentially it works in sort of report form and in 3D. And it works very well for both the CAD and BIM technicians and for someone managing the project as well. So there are a number of BCF managers that plug into all the different BIM softwares. So as you're going around the model, you can actually, just with a tool palette built in, highlight issues in the model, requests, more information needed in the model, and that is populating sort of a list that's synchronized with the online server. And with those sort of text that's been synchronized as well, there is the actual sort of location within the model that issue is. So someone else in Revit opens up their coordinating palette that's synchronized, they click on the issue and they're taken directly to where it is in the model, just to really speed up how these issues are being resolved. It's also great in terms of sort of there's the web portal and PDF reporting that can be downloaded, and we found this sort of a really good tool for use in design team meetings. I mean, talking about information silos, like emails are sort of one of the great benefits of technology, but at the same time, hundreds and hundreds of emails disappearing into your inbox, it's very easy to miss stuff. So just having everything there with sort of, you can put dates that stuff needs to be complete by, who's actually looking at it, has just been a massive benefit of making sure that stuff isn't being left behind or forgotten about. Everything's brought along at the same time. If it was enough of an issue to be raised, then it being documented there and being ticked off as we go through, it's just a great way to make sure everything's coming backwards and forwards and being resolved in a timely manner. And then just an extension of this as well. So the previous slide and process is what we're using in all our projects. But then the next step forward with sort of BIM level 2 implementation and really driving sort of the utilisation of BIM forward would be sort of the utilisation of sort of clash detection software, stuff like Celebri, Navisworks, and BIM coordination managers. So we'd be using those in some of the bigger projects like shopping centres where like no sort of level of manual model checking is going to pick up all the issues that are going to be there. But at the same time, the outputs from this software, you really need a BIM coordination manager that's used to setting up the rules and parameters to make sure that you're not getting 1,000 issues about a cable clashing with some fire stopping that it's meant to be going through anyway. Really refining down the information that's being presented as the issues to be solved to make sure that everyone is sort of focused on what's actually needs to be solved rather than just being bombarded with information. and getting sort of data fatigue and just going through issues that shouldn't really be issues. And then with sort of concepts like the Open BIM standards, these softwares actually feed back into stuff like the BCF managers that I was just talking about previously. So that's all linking into the BIM technicians' workflow within their BIM software that they're using. That's all reportable within PDFs and issued out to people. So it's sort of that's sort of the next level up, but works and talks back to previous good practices of sort of collaboration that you might do on a slightly smaller scale. And I suppose with the use of BIM and all those like communication practices, we've actually found recently there's been a lot of projects that have been sort of previously costed. All the OMCs were stacking up commercially, but with sort of current pressures like inflation, the war in Ukraine, previously COVID, stuff like that, there's been a big push to try and find efficiencies in the models and bring back under control sort of the cost management of the project and bringing it back within sort of what's all been signed off in a sort of efficient manner. And we've just been utilising BIM as much as possible just to sort of assess the building. In this example, sort of a lot of the elevations were all sort of different sizes, and we had to really sort of refine back the dimensional qualities of each of the facades so that each of those red elements are a carbon copy of each other, essentially. So it's really bringing efficiency and repetition into the building without actually distracting from the original design intent and quite organic sort of nature of the project. And because all that is model-based data, that is all automatically providing sort of schedules of quantities and numbers. So it's just quite an agile process of feedback with the QSs and with the client and the other consultants to really quickly sort of get through this process of like chipping away at the project to get it to be commercially viable again. We've also used a similar process to sort of look at new methods of construction and validate that, and if it is going to be useful in the projects we're using. So essentially on this one, just coming off the back of another job where sort of fire compartmentation and protection of primary steel was a big issue. We were sort of fresh off the back of learnings of that and trying to utilise this specific example of modular construction, shipping containers, that was working well in the UK and other areas, trying to bring it into the Irish market for a hotel. And we sort of applied our knowledge to that. But it was particularly difficult to bring everyone else along on the same journey, looking at 2D details and trying to get everyone's head around the challenges to get this delivered. So we found it really useful to essentially just model what we were being provided in 2D by the manufacturer, just to really highlight sort of the level of structural protection that would be required if you're going for the four-sided protection of the primary steel, and then how that sort of essentially undoes what the shipping container is, all the sealed edges and everything, and the fit out that's already completed inside. It's essentially picking it apart. And essentially what we found here is if it's presented in a way that everyone can understand it and digest it, half the work is done. You're not struggling in meetings to bring everyone along on the journey to see where the problems are and what the problems are, and you're essentially starting off straight away with people trying to offer solutions to the problem. So you're really able to sort of get through that development process and actually assess whether it's something that's going to be viable, look at a couple of different options, assess all the everyone's input to actually try and get this to a point where we can decide it's viable or it's not possible, or with current regulations it's not currently possible at the moment without a lot of additional cost and a lot of picking apart what this specific system originally is and what its selling points were. And then the construction phase, I suppose I'll just left this one fairly light because I know Sarah's got a lot of good work done on that, but I suppose it's just highlighting there's been a lot of good uptake from main contractors on common data environments, and it's, as Sarah was going through, it really simplifies all of the document management. Like everyone knows where the true information is that everyone's working to, and it's kept up to date. All the revisions are monitored, and it leaves little option for sort of mistakes and people picking up on the wrong information. Similar with stuff like RFIs and submittals, like everything there is listed out for you. Like this snapshot just here, you know exactly what's ahead of you, you know exactly what stage the project's at, and you know exactly where you need to focus your efforts on to make sure that the contractor has everything they need to be effectively getting this job built and working through any delays. I suppose my only sort of feedback on that is you just need to try and figure out the best way for you to manage the information that's coming in from these common data environments. So they're very good at notifications, but again, sort of you can get a bit notification fatigue, so you need to find processes that work for you to sort of manage that information. There's the settings in a lot of the common data environments where you can have a weekly update of all the issues, or a daily update of the issues, or instant updates of the issues to sort of manage the amount of stuff that's firing into your inbox. Or another way that I found to do it is just set up email rules in Outlook, so all of your human emails that are coming in are all there and they're not lost in a barrage of automated emails. Those automated ones are automatically going into a sub file that you're checking sort of once a day or once every couple of days, and as a reminder to log into the common data environment and sort of get up to speed on current issues that need your attention. And then as well, sort of a lot of the common data environments have this sort of as a feature as well, but our BIM software that we use has a companion app that's on the iPad, which is just great for accessibility of information. Sort of we use this a lot at construction stage, but we also use it back at the initial design stages and detailed design to communicate with clients and other sort of other stakeholders in the project, and that's sort of brought along all the way through to construction. So it's just a really good way of everything in the BIM model is there, and having it as separate PDFs in a huge folder of information, as good as it is at managing the revisions of that information, it's not in its current format something that is easily digestible. It's just reams and reams of PDF drawings. Some of the common data environments are starting to get a bit of manners on that and different ways of displaying it, but the companion app that we've been using has just been really, really good in terms of the 2D drawings. Any sections in the 2D drawings, you can click on those and that automatically takes you to the sections, and that can be overlaid on the 3D BIM model within the app. The whole thing is sort of offline on the iPad, so it's great going around site for on-site walks. The contractor has a question, you can more than likely find it on the information you have in front of you, and if you haven't, it at least brings you one step forward into, okay, we've got half the information there, and you can discuss the second half of the information that needs to be supplied to fully close out the issue. So we've really found that that's sort of reducing the amount of questions and unnecessary backwards and forwards. Like this example here was great for the contractor, but also for the client and stakeholders. We had sort of on one site a shopping centre and an office block, and connecting the two of those, the only thing connecting those was a old disused boiler room. And the design initially was connected to that boiler room because not a lot was known about it, but then when we sort of really peeled back the layers to understand what it was built, how it was built, and dimensionally how that worked, then we were able to, and it was particularly important to communicate to the client and contractor exactly what was going to be demolished. So we sort of marqueed a section in the drawing, highlighted what was there for demolition, and then that finally allowed us to sort of create a clean break between the two buildings to give the client sort of future scope to sort of debond the assets and do stuff with them separately, so they weren't sort of interlinked because there were two different sort of building types. And then sort of the final one I'm just going to briefly touch on is sort of how the complete asset is sort of going to accelerate sort of wider adoption of BIM. So at the moment we're sort of using BIM a lot in sort of the middle part of the process, all of our drawings, all of our coordination. It does sort of fall down a bit sometimes when it gets to the contractor because the client hasn't necessarily got the appetite for additional consultants required to really get the model, well, to maintain the model through construction to something that can be used for FM. But I suppose at the moment there are a few clients are sort of starting to increase their awareness of the value that that's potentially going to bring them. And even though I think a couple of the clients that have put it in their design brief and requirements have taken it out, once they saw some of the additional consultant costs, it's sort of slowly inching further and further forward into being a reality and a standard process. And I suppose on top of that as well, so that's on the back end of the design process, construction process, going sort of full circle back to the front end of the design process. Things like the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy, which is sort of looking to the sort of its purpose is to try and reduce sort of greenwashing and to sort of allow investment into green building, construction and infrastructure, and the way that certain projects are financed. There's going to be a lot more focus at the start of the project where the biggest impact can be made on sort of the carbon footprint of the building. There's a number of different services where you can essentially be uploading multiple iterations of the building at the early design stages, and you're getting sort of very quick outputs. All the information is there, some of the materials, so putting in the BIM model, so sort of BIM workflows are sort of a natural enabler of that sort of process. You're feeding that into models, a few different iterations are then feeding back to actually the total carbon footprint of the building that's being designed. And I suppose just for a quick example, like you could be looking at a 2-story building that's quite large in footprint, and just an iteration of taking some of that building, putting it on top as a 3rd story. You're saving some of the groundworks, you're saving concrete, you're saving 2 areas of roof and putting that into 1 area of roof. So that's with the actual form of the building, along with investigating different sort of methods of construction as well. So even though there's currently sort of limitations in the use of stuff like cross-laminated timber, on this example here, sort of the concrete in the foundations was a huge driver of the carbon footprint of the building, and using sort of lighter construction. Once stuff like that makes its way through the sort of construction industry in Ireland, and there are acceptable standards that everyone's sort of meeting and the regulations are supporting, then that's really something that can be at the forefront of sort of that part of the conversation with clients. And
is 1 minute okay?
That was literally the last word, yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Lee.